Hi there, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Tuesday. Tonight, picking pipeline sides.
But he hasn't acknowledged yet the need for an industrial carbon price or the reduction in methane.
But if he's going to vote against his own words, how can Canadians ever believe his words?
The Tories wanted to force a House vote on Mark Carney's caucus support for the federal Alberta pipeline deal to expose division in Liberal ranks. But the government says Pierre Poilievre is cherry-picking from their agreement. You're going to watch that vote take place live while we're on air tonight. Plus, Energy Parliamentary Secretary Cory Hogan will join us moments before he casts his vote. Plus, has the government struck a deal with the Bloc Québécois to advance its anti-hate bill? We're going to dig into that with our front bench, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. First, though.
But let's be honest, he never planned to honor the agreement. He whispered quietly to the Keep It in the Ground Liberal caucus, don't worry, there will never be a pipeline.
The MOU between the Government of Canada and the province of Alberta is about a pipeline. It is about carbon capture and storage. It is about an industrial carbon price that works.
We put the carbon capture right in the motion, right out of his deal. So now it's clear that the only thing he really cares about is that it doesn't include an industrial carbon tax.
I'm not a lifelong member of this House, so I don't know all the rules, but
All right, that's the back and forth in the House of Commons on this motion, which will be voted on in about 45 minutes. But at this moment, I have some breaking news to share with you. Just coming into our newsroom, multiple sources are confirming that Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., plans to step down from that role in the new year. We don't know many of the details surrounding this decision. Understandably, this is a huge role, a very significant role that Ambassador Hillman has played throughout this administration, the Carney administration, you could say, or this government, and the previous one under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. She was a key figure navigating the relationship with the new White House in particular. If you think back to Friday during that FIFA World Cup draw in Washington, sitting right next to the Prime Minister's wife, Diana Carney, was Kirsten Hillman. The news right now, again, coming into our newsroom, is that she has decided to step down from that role in the new year. We are awaiting an official statement from the Prime Minister, which we do anticipate certainly will be coming any moment now. We don't have any information yet on the reasons as to this or who exactly will replace her, though there are a number of names being circulated right now, so perhaps the statement from the Prime Minister will address that. We will keep our eyes peeled for it. I'm sitting here with two of my colleagues, Rachel Aiello and Mike Couture, who are furiously working the phones to find out if we can get that information. Before we get to the vote and the political stakes of this vote, let's talk a little bit about this decision from Ambassador Hillman. We have covered her, Mike and Rachel, for a number of years. A key figure, but one who has been far less public-facing in the last number of months than she was a year ago, 8 months ago.
Yeah, since May at least, right? I mean, that was the last time we had really seen her beside Mark Carney. She was in the Oval Office in that latest visit on October 7th, also the one in May as well, but certainly taking a very much less public role. I mean, we have not seen her on your show here, Vashti, on Power Play in a number of months, certainly, and the fact that she has not really been doing any of the negotiating right now because it's all been paused. She has still been the point person, the person that has been designated in Washington to continue those discussions with Howard Lutnick, with Jameson Greer, and everybody else in D.C. But at this point, it seemed like she was not having that prominent role that she did during the Trudeau government, where she really was the more forward-facing person and the one that was always sort of taking the questions and, in a sense, answering everything that is happening down there for the Trudeau government. Now we're seeing Prime Minister Mark Carney, clearly the one that is more comfortable doing that and the one that wants to be the public-facing, the face for the public, I should say, on this file. So in a sense, not entirely shocking that she, if she's making this decision, as you said, but certainly something that, will be missed.
And she just put out a statement while I bring it up on my computer. Rachel, your thoughts on, in particular, her office was pretty transparent. It's a long statement, so it'll take me a while to get up in a big picture here. But her office was even transparent that she wanted to talk, but wasn't able to give interviews, essentially.
Yeah, and I think picking up on Mike's point about her not being the front-facing person, the Prime Minister's top staffer has been in D.C. on and off again consistently, essentially being the ones, while Hillman may be on paper the lead person on this file, the Prime Minister's office has definitely taken a more hands-on approach with these negotiations or trade talks, wherever they stand right now. And I think it does bear kind of answering or putting the question out there, Vashi, of another female in a prominent position within the highest ranks of Prime Minister Mark Carney's government are leaving. Obviously, we'll see who ends up replacing her. But I think it leads to the other kind of illusion or impression that some have of a boys' club at the highest levels around the Prime Minister. Obviously, we have no indication what was behind her decision to leave now, but losing Canada's ambassador to the United States at this juncture is absolutely massive. And so we are hearing that the Prime Minister will release a statement, isn't going to be speaking publicly, but this is all happening amid some fervor in the House of Commons. So this is like quite a December.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly, we just got, we have lots of other news with this vote to cover in just a moment, but her statement says, after 8 years in Washington, including 6 as Canada's ambassador to the U.S., I've advised Prime Minister Carney that I will be ending my tenure in the United States in the new year. It's been the greatest privilege of my professional life to have served and represented Canada and Canadians during this critical period in Canada-U.S. relations. The statement goes on to say, most recently, as the Canada-U.S. relationship is being rewritten, I have been deeply grateful for Prime Minister Carney's strong leadership and for the confidence that he has placed in me. While there will never be a perfect time to leave, this is the right time to put a team in place that will see the CUSMA review through to its conclusion. So once again, the developing news, Ambassador Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the United States, has announced that she will step down from that role in the new year. We are awaiting a statement from the Prime Minister on her departure, but also on her potential replacement. As soon as that statement comes in, we will, of course, share it with you in any reaction we get to her departure as well. But pretty significant news on a very significant file in Canada-U.S. relations. I do want to turn now to what we started off talking about, which is the vote that takes place. Thank you also to my colleagues, Michael Couture and Rachel Aiello. The vote that takes place in about 40 minutes in the House of Commons is all about the Conservatives' motion around building a pipeline and the Alberta-Ottawa MOU. I want to bring in Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, who is live with us now from the House of Commons. Hi, Mr. Scheer. Good to see you again. Thank you very much for making the time. Okay, let me just make sure I can hear you. Can I hear you now? Sorry.
I can hear you fine. I don't know if you can hear me, but
now
okay.
I've got you. My apologies. My apologies. Let me just start off on the amendments today, because when we spoke last night, it was just a straight up and down, do you support the construction of an additional pipeline? Today, Mr. Poilievre in the morning announced some additional language from the MOU around carbon capture, for example, Indigenous ownership, working with BC. It didn't include the industrial price on carbon. If you were going to include other stuff, why not that?
Well, Conservatives have always been opposed to carbon taxes, but really this vote is about the essence of it. You know, the point of the MOU, the point of Mark Carney flying out to Alberta and going through the signing ceremony was to get to a pipeline. It wasn't really for anything else. And what we're hoping to do is get Liberals on the record here in Ottawa. Do they support this deal that their own Prime Minister signed? When we think about what it's going to take to get a pipeline built to the Pacific Ocean, this should be the easiest part of it. And the fact that Mark Carney can't even get his own caucus on board tells us that he's not going to be able to succeed on this. How is he ever going to navigate through all the various consultations, meetings with different provincial premiers, if he can't even come to Ottawa and get the very MPs who sit in his caucus to sign on to the deal that he signed himself?
But is there, why doesn't the other party to that agreement, Premier Danielle Smith, have the same concerns that you're raising right now? Like, why isn't she saying, I'm worried about this actually happening? She's the one that signed it. She's also a Conservative. She's been very critical of federal Liberals in the past for a lack of commitment to additional pipeline export capacity. She isn't saying what you're saying.
Well, look, I mean, I'm not going to speak for the Premier of Alberta. I suppose that, if Mark Carney wants to compare his record to Justin Trudeau's record and offer even a glimmer of hope to the province of Alberta, the government of Alberta is going to make those kinds of decisions. What the Conservatives are offering the people of Alberta and all Canadians is a yes. We support a pipeline to the Pacific Coast. We want Canada to sell more of our energy to Asian countries, getting off that U.S. dependence. sense. And Vashi, when other countries around the world are buying Canadian exports, that means that they do that in Canadian dollars. That's going to boost the purchasing price of the Canadian dollar. It's going to benefit every Canadian who has to buy things in the grocery store or in other stores. This is a win-win all around. And what Conservatives would do is we would get that path to the Pacific Ocean, getting Western Canadian natural resources to market without an industrial carbon tax, without all these new hoops and hurdles that's forcing Alberta to navigate through even more red tape to get to a yes. So that's the contrast here. But the point of the motion here tonight is this motion doesn't contradict anything in the MOU. It doesn't ask Liberals to denounce any part of the MOU. We're just trying to find out can Mark Carney find consensus even in his own caucus to support a pipeline? And as of 5:10 this evening, the answer to that is no.
But why does he need that consensus in order to support the pipeline? Like in the MOU, it expressly says that he will. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of your party, has taken views on a wide variety of subjects that not all your MPs agree on. Why is that consensus necessary?
Well, because I believe what Canadians are watching unfold is this. Mark Carney does not believe in developing more oil and gas. He wrote that in his book, and I know you've at least I know you're familiar with that. He has specifically written chapter and verse. He's gone on he's gone on TV shows and he's talked about the need to leave our oil and gas in the ground. But he's got a problem because Canadians want it. So what he's doing is he's telling Canadians right now, he said, some date far into the future, 2027. Maybe 2029, there's a possibility of a pipeline. And he's coming back to Ottawa and he's telling all the people who share his radical ideology, his leave it in the ground, praise of carbon taxes team here in Ottawa, that don't worry, it'll never happen. And that's what we're trying to draw out here to show Canadians, like if the Liberal caucus had confidence in the MOU that Mark Carney signed himself, this should be a no-brainer. This should have been a Tuesday morning announcement where they said, of course we're going to vote in favor of this. Mark Carney just signed on to it. But the fact that they're so twisted on this, the fact it took them days and days to arrive at a decision tells you that they're not in support of this. And the reason why this is important is because there are elements in this MOU that will require changes to legislation. And if Mark Carney can't get his own team on board, what does that say about what would be required to actually get it passed? And when we think about all the hurdles that Indigenous consultation is difficult. It's important, but it's difficult. Working with provinces is difficult, but it's important. This should be the easiest part of the entire approval process, getting Liberals to agree with their own Liberal leaders' MOU, and Mark Carney can't get that done.
But if I think back to the rationale that your party has provided for calling for, let's say, a lot of the environmental regulations to be lifted, for calling, for various processes to be superseded, it's all been about, fostering an environment where the private sector wants to invest more, where the uncertainty that you allege was created under the previous prime minister is removed. What does making it a political football, what purpose does that serve in that vein? Like, are you not sending a signal by trying to expose what you would characterize as a very divided caucus, like cast doubt on this MOU? Are you not doing exactly what you said Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did?
Well, first of all, I don't believe it's fair to say we're alleging that there was uncertainty in investment in the natural resource sector. Every single major Canadian pipeline project was either vetoed or canceled or abandoned, and those Canadian energy companies took those dollars and invested in the United States to the point where the Liberal government had to buy a pipeline, something that never happened in previous Conservative or even previous Liberal governments. And what this motion was all about was to show that consensus here in Ottawa that, yes, Conservatives have been in favor of pipelines, we've been in favor of exporting more of our natural resources. And now it's the Liberals that are blocking that. The only party that has turned this into a political football is the Liberal Party. We took the words right out of the MOU. We literally lifted it, copied and pasted it, because we wanted Liberals to be able to we wanted Liberals to be able to vote in favor of this.
Yeah, but respectfully, as I said, like you cherry-picked parts of the MOU and only decided to change that today, and still not to a fulsome degree.
No, I reject that premise, because there's not one single part of this motion that asks a Liberal to vote against another part. again, why did Mark Carney go to Alberta? Why did he sit down beside Premier Danielle Smith to sign this MOU? It wasn't to get to a yes on anything other than a pipeline to the Pacific. So the point was, let's all agree on that. You know, Liberals and Conservatives might have a difference of opinion on how to get there, on how to do that without, say, a massive hike in the carbon tax. But surely, after that MOU was signed, we can all agree that that was the goal. And we fully expected that the Liberals would vote in favor of this. Then they started raising opposition. They started raising objections based on carbon capture, based on Indigenous consultation and working with other provinces. So we said, okay, well, let's take that off the table for you. Let's put that into the motion. This was a good faith effort to show some kind of consensus here in Ottawa, to send that signal to the investment community that the two major parties in Canada support a pipeline to the Pacific, and the Liberals can't even deliver their part of it.
Mr. Scheer, with great respect, you think that you think Canadians will believe that you wanted to show consensus in good faith, that you did not want to expose divisions within the Liberals on an issue that has been a political winner for your party and now appears to be less so?
Just because the Liberals say something doesn't make it true, Vashi. You'll pardon me for taking Mark Carney at his word. When he signs the MOU and says that all Liberals support it, I believe it's totally fair to say, okay, well, let's have the House of Commons endorse that. The only people, the only party that has turned this into any kind of a as you say, a political football or a division are the Liberals. Every other party is very clear on where they stand. Don Davies and the NDP, extremely clear. They don't support pipelines. That's fine. They can take that message to the Canadian people. The Conservative Party, we've been very clear for the past 10 years and prior. We support our men and women in the energy sector. We see the benefit for all Canadians selling more of our natural resources around the world. It's only the Liberals that are twisting themselves up on this, and they're projecting. They're projecting onto the Conservative Party. They're trying to spin the media into saying that this is somehow something that the Conservatives are doing. We literally took Mark Carney at his word. We took his words on the page that he signed himself, and we're just asking the House of Commons to endorse that.
Okay, we'll look forward to the vote. Mr. Scheer, thank you so much for making the time for this. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. That's Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer from the foyer of the House of Commons. That vote is exactly half an hour away, and we'll take you there live as soon as it happens. I do want to turn back to that breaking news off the top of our program, which is that the Canadian ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, has announced that she is stepping down from that position as of the new year. Just around 5 o'clock Eastern, she put out a statement to that effect. And we now have in our inbox a statement from the Prime Minister responding to her announcement. He writes, Ambassador Hillman's intelligence, determined action, and diplomacy have contributed immensely to the advancement of a new economic and security relationship with the United States and prepared the foundations for Canada in the upcoming review of CUSMA. As one of the longest-serving ambassadors to the U.S. in our history, her wide-ranging and constructive engagement with all branches of the U.S. government, as well as with leaders across America and Canada, have yielded crucial results for Canadians. Through a period, the Prime Minister writes, of transformation in the relationship, Ambassador Hillman has resolutely defended Canadian values and interests while promoting a stronger future for workers who depend on stable trade, families who count on a safe and secure border, and businesses navigating new global uncertainty. As she prepares to step down from her role in the new year, I'm grateful to Ambassador Hillman for her invaluable counsel and thank her for her long record of dedicated service to all Canadians. So that statement almost entirely about Ambassador Hillman. It is entirely about Ambassador Hillman stepping aside. No pronouncement there of her replacement, but we are certainly tracking a lot of the speculation about who that will be. A very consequential resignation of sorts here. Ambassador Hillman has not only led the diplomatic relations with the United States through Trump 2, but she also was a key figure in renegotiating NAFTA with Trump administration version 1. She has been involved, I believe, in the U.S. relationship in that capacity or as ambassador now for the better part of 8 years. So this is a very significant decision, in one that certainly, will have some political consequences as well. That's exactly what we're going to talk about after a short commercial break with our front bench, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone will be here. Plus, that big vote is coming up in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Play. We've got a lot on the go this evening, including a vote coming down the pipe in about 25 minutes on that Conservative motion around pipeline support and the memorandum of understanding between Ottawa. There you can see the countdown clock there between Ottawa and Alberta. That's 25 minutes away. The Liberals have already made it pretty clear that they plan to vote against it. We're going to talk to Cory Hogan, the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Energy, right before he casts his vote, so about 10 minutes from now. But we're also tracking some significant news about our relationship with the United States. Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, just minutes ago announced that she would be stepping down from that role and that she would be doing so in the new year. She posted a lengthy statement to that effect. Prime Minister Mark Carney has also posted a statement thanking her for her service. And we're just getting into our inbox now, a statement from former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, of course, appointed Kirsten Hillman to that role. He says, Kirsten Hillman is a real patriot who has served Canadians proudly and effectively in the face of unprecedented challenges against our economy and our sovereignty. Former Prime Minister Trudeau goes on to say, my first meeting with Kirsten was on my first official trip as Prime Minister, mere weeks after being elected, as she briefed me in the Philippines on the complexities and opportunities of our trade with Asia. Her skill, toughness, and commitment to her country shone through from the very beginning. No official announcement from the Prime Minister right now as to who will replace her, but of course this is a key role right now in the relationship with the United States and the very tenuous first negotiations, now not negotiations, around the trade war that has developed certainly over the last number of months. We've got the front bench here to talk about all of that. With me this evening, former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. Dan Moulton is with us. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Larissa Waller is the founder of Henley Strategies. She's a former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton, now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good to see you. So we'll start with this before we get into the vote. Kathleen, I mean, look, she has not been doing interviews. She has not been as public-facing as she was extremely public-facing before. So, I'm not surprised, to be honest, based on a lot of, speculation behind the scenes. But it feels like a big moment. Like, she was a key figure for years and years and years.
There are not many ambassadors on behalf of Canada that most normal Canadians could name at home. And I think actually Ambassador Hillman, people would recognize and would recognize the work that she's done. Long-serving ambassador. I mean, listen, she served through 3 different U.S. administrations, 2 of them being Trump. I mean, that alone, in diplomatic terms, we have to measure those in dog years. So it's more like 3 decades, not just 6 years she's been there. She navigated through COVID and the border closures and all of that, and of course did CUSMA. And even before she went to Washington, she was known for her trade deal with the CPTPP. Don't ask me to explain the full name of that one. But, so it is a big loss. First of all, she was the first woman also appointed as U.S. ambassador. That's significant as well. And she really handled herself so capably under incredibly tense, not just the first NAFTA negotiation deal, but also, as I said, COVID, and now the second round and everything that she's been through. So a huge loss, especially as you noted, Vashi, at this critical time, this critical juncture where we're about to negotiate CUSMA once again. A big loss, but, there has been some rumors, that she, with the work of not only the clerk, Dominic LeBlanc, even the chief of staff to the Prime Minister, coming down and doing a lot of that heavy lift, that maybe she wasn't fully holding all the reins. But I mean, kudos to her. I have nothing but good things to say, obviously, and wish her the best. After that many years in Washington, I would probably want a break too.
Dan, your thoughts on the decision that Ambassador Hillman is making, and then any hints or clues? I think Bloomberg is reporting it could be Mark Wiseman, for example, who steps into. I don't have independent confirmation of that, but most people I ask right now are saying that sounds about right. Who could step into her shoes? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by recognizing, as Kathleen has done, the enormous achievements of Ambassador Hillman and certainly the profile that she's built in this role. She's made an unusual transition from someone who had a career in diplomacy and in the Foreign Service and transitioned it into a figure that a lot of Canadians recognize and has really led our mission to the United States with a lot of poise and profile, and I think has done so very successfully, to the extent that when a new Prime Minister took the reins earlier this year, she held on to that job. There was an interest in keeping a steady hand on our relationship in Washington, D.C., and she was chosen to continue doing that role for a lot of good reasons. As you say in the outset here, not a big surprise that she is stepping down and been doing this role for some time. And I do think at a certain point the Prime Minister was going to look to bring in his own person for this position. Yeah, as you say, there's speculation it may be Mark Wiseman, the former head of the Canadian Pension Fund. I think that is, worthy speculation. Certainly, that we'll see if that's confirmed, and if it's true, it's certainly a name that's been floated around for some time to take on a role like this, and I think would be consistent with a trend we've seen from this Prime Minister and his office, which is bringing in private sector, corporate leaders, this country that have profile and a strong reputation with the business community to take on roles like this one to provide the kind of leadership the Prime Minister, I think, has made a commitment to Canadians he intends to bring, and certainly an appointment like Mr. Wiseman would continue that.
Larissa, what do you think?
I agree with Kathleen and Dan for sure. I think that a shift to somebody like Mr. Wiseman would show a commitment to breaking with the Trudeau regime and looking more towards a pro-business agenda. I think where we have to be a little bit careful here, I mean, everybody in Washington has Google, and Wiseman was one of the co-authors of the Century Initiative, which wasn't that big of a deal in our election, but a very, very kind of pro-immigrant, throw open the borders sort of policy that might go against what a Trump administration might want to see, but you can't criticize his business credentials. I just also think the stakes are so high here. So if we're shuffling the chairs and we're putting people in new positions, if he doesn't deliver and if there isn't a change in tone, it'll be seen as a massive disappointment. So I wish him, if it is him, all the best. I like Dan and Kathleen, I do thank Ambassador Hillman for her many years of exemplary service, and I hope it works.
Laura, last word to you on this. Again, if you're just joining us, some developing news on our watch. Kirsten Hillman, our ambassador to the United States, has announced that she will step down from that position as of the new year.
Yeah, I mean, Kirsten Hillman obviously has an excellent reputation, seen as very skilled and competent. I was actually surprised back in June when Prime Minister Carney kept her on and appointed her as the chief negotiator. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised as that, because I think that signaled some continuity. But I think we've seen the Prime Minister to be kind of a very insular leader in a sense of kind of being a bit cagey with details. And we've seen that shift certainly with the Canada-U.S. relationship. We haven't seen as many public updates as has been noted by either politicians or the ambassador on the status of the talks. And obviously, they have not gone as successfully as the Prime Minister had hoped back in the summer. And I'm not saying that that's really necessarily anyone's fault on the Canadian side. We've seen the president lash out at Canada for a variety of reasons. But if you appoint someone like a Mark Wiseman, who I also believe was a fundraiser for the Prime Minister and his leadership campaign, that's someone who's obviously close to him. The Prime Minister has appointed him already to some sort of Canada-U.S. Council. I think that shows kind of a bit more of the walls closing in and the Prime Minister surrounding himself very much with his team and his trusted advisors. And maybe it does signal a shift or the need for a restart with the U.S. as the relationship has kind of gone off the rails because of according to the U.S., the government TV ad from Ontario. They're looking for some sort of reset now in the new year. And if you bring in someone close to the Prime Minister, he's obviously got his team of preferred people that he likes to be around, people with business experience. And we'll see, if that does end up being the case, if that's a successful strategy for Canada.
Okay, that breaking news, Kirsten Hillman leaving her job as Canada's ambassador to the U.S. in the new year. We're going to press pause for a moment, if you guys don't mind. Laura, Larissa, Dan, and Kathleen are going to stand by. We're about 14 minutes away from the big vote in the House of Commons. And we are joined now from just outside the room where that vote will take place by the Minister of Energy's Parliamentary Secretary, Cory Hogan. Hi, Mr. Hogan, it's good to have you on the program. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, great to be back on.
I know you have an exact deadline that you have to leave by to get back in there to vote, and we'll certainly carry that vote live. So I'll get right into it. I want to start off by asking you if you've all decided to vote no, essentially because it's easier than the public seeing how many Liberals actually don't want a pipeline?
No, not at all. Look, if this was a vote on the entire Memorandum of Understanding, we would vote yes. But this is a delicate balance. This is a delicate balance with British Columbia and Indigenous peoples. It's a delicate balance with Alberta and with business community. And the MOU was constructed to meet that balance. And we're not going to vote on parts of the MOU. Pierre Poilievre could have easily moved the entire MOU, and that is something we could have happily supported. But we can't support just part of the MOU, because that would be doing a disservice to the entirety.
Do you really think that all Liberal MPs would vote in favor of the full MOU if it was put to them? We certainly know that one MP, former Cabinet Minister Stephen Guilbeault, would not.
Well, look, I don't like to speak in absolutes on those things. That's a way to look foolish in this business, but it would be an overwhelming majority. I think you would be in a situation where, it would be so close to unanimity from the Liberal caucus, it would be effective unanimity. We're quite united on this. But we're united because of the balance, the ability to grow the economy, grow the environmental protections, and also separate ourselves from the United States through a new piece of infrastructure that opens up trade with Asia. These things are all connected, and the Liberal caucus knows that, and the Liberal caucus supports that.
Forgive me if maybe my impression is Canadians might also have a different impression. I think not just of Stephen Guilbeault. I think of your Minister of Housing, who also sits around the cabinet table, who has at various times voiced very specific opposition to the construction not only of the pipeline that currently exists in TMX, but also additional pipeline export capacity to BC's coast. I think of all the BC MPs who have voiced their discomfort with the arrangement that has been made and said, actually, in one case, that the Prime Minister had to answer for something that existed in the budget that was then explicitly countered in the MOU. Again, I'll put to you, are you all saying no today because it's easier than showing Canadians that you are actually more divided than you intimate?
No, look, this is, there are going to be a diversity of views in any caucus. Our caucus is no different. I'll note our caucus is held together. We haven't hemorrhaged MPs the way the Conservative caucus has, but we're united on this. Now, in any big bargain, there are going to be components where you're like, oh, that's awesome, and components where you're like, oh, I guess, I'll take my medicine if I have to, but I don't really enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the cake. And that's true. That's just a reality, which is why the MOU is so important to be considered as a balancing act between interests, between economic issues, between environmental issues, and of course, making sure that we're separate from the United States. But no, make no mistake, if this had been a vote on the MOU, we would support the MOU. But that's not what this is. This is a vote to see if the Conservatives can pick at divisions. And in no way does it make a pipeline more likely, regardless of how the vote goes tonight.
I do take your point on that, and just if people are watching and they hear those bells, it's not out of nowhere. It's a signal to MPs to come and cast their vote soon. I do wonder, though, when you talk about the content of the motion and that it doesn't have the entire balance. It was amended to include some parts of the balance that you say your government intends to strike or aims to strike with this MOU, but it also doesn't ask you to vote against the stuff that you create that creates that balance. It just takes some stuff that's in there and asks you to affirm it. Like it's to vote in the positive. It's not to vote against. Why is that so difficult?
Well, because when people look at it, they're going to interpret it as you voted for these things and you didn't vote for the other things that were really important to me as we were moving forward. So if you're a First Nations community and you see us just voting for driving this forward without some of those protections, what do you think of that? If you're an Alberta business person and you see it, you might get the interpretation or the impression that the industrial carbon pricing is not part of that deal, which, by the way, no industrial carbon pricing, I don't see how you get pathways constructed. So I find the amended motion from the Conservatives a little incoherent, to put it modestly. You've got to look at it as a whole package. It would have been very simple for the Conservatives to move the entire MOU. They chose not to. And so this is where we are tonight.
But what if you're in the business community and you're searching for the certainty that your government has ultimately now conceded didn't exist under the previous prime minister, and you're looking to see, hey, is there going to be the kind of political support that we have deemed necessary in order to allow for example, a private proponent to come forward? If they see your entire party vote no, just on a question of do you support these things that are already in the MOU, what message do you think that sends them?
Well, this is exactly why the Conservative motion was such a disservice to this country. The reality is, if we vote yes, it looks like we don't take a seriously consultation with BC and Indigenous peoples. And if we vote no, we're going to end up in a situation where people can question our support to her pipeline. So let me be really clear. We support a pipeline, but creating these traps the way Pierre Poilievre has tried to do, where he tries to get these gotcha moments, this doesn't advance the goal of getting a pipeline. If anything, it moves us further away from it. It certainly risks us moving further away from it. And we got to move past these games in Parliament. We've got to start doing the work we were sent here to do, and that is not this. That is not what I'm about to go vote on. It's not this game-making, these gotcha moments that the Conservatives are trying to construct.
Look, I asked that exact question to the Conservatives House Leader a few minutes ago, so I do understand the point you're making on that. I also covered Parliament when the Liberals were in opposition, and they introduced a myriad of motions on things like the Afghanistan war that were not meant to actually provide for a fruitful conversation or an end or a timeline, and instead to expose political division. So it's what opposition parties do. I'll again put to you, though, Mr. Hogan, look, you said BC, you mentioned Indigenous people. Both of those things were added in the same language that are in the MOU. What harm would it do to just, vote yes, really clearly communicate that your party actually does support a pipeline and the other things that are in there, while not contradicting any of the other stuff that's in your actual MOU?
Well, the harm again is it looks like we only care about certain components of it, and that's exactly the tactic that's at play here. Again, it would have taken nothing to put the entire MOU up for debate and up for discussion today, but that's not what the decision was, and we got to do better. And in terms of previous parliaments and what oppositions may have done there, maybe they did. I like to think I wouldn't have supported such tactics. Maybe I would. Maybe I'll look like a hypocrite someday. But I know right now, at this moment, where we are with the United States, where the world is, we've got to do better.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. You've got a minute to get back into the House of Commons. I appreciate you making the time.
Okay,
Thank you.
I better go. Thank you.
That's Cory Hogan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy. We'll take a quick commercial break before that vote unfolds live on our watch. The front bench is going to be here to walk us through as the votes are cast. Back in a moment with more Power Play.
It's not just the pipeline. It's not just pathways. It is a price on industrial price on carbon that goes to $130 effective. It is reductions in methane.
And if he votes against the motion, he's voting against a pipeline to the Pacific. He's voting against consultation with the First Nations people and the British Columbia government.
That, to my hearing, for the first time ever in this House, the Leader of the Opposition has acknowledged the constitutional right of Indigenous people to full, free, and fair.
Not only do we acknowledge the obligation to consult with our First Peoples, we put that right in the motion.
It's there.
It's right there. It's right there, Mark.
It is.
Some more of the debate in the House of Commons as MPs prepare to vote on a Conservative motion that echoes some, but not all, of the language in the Liberal government's pipeline deal with Alberta. I think we can take, or no, the live look isn't there, but the countdown is on. We're exactly edge of your seats here, people. 3 minutes and 30 seconds away from the vote to take place first on the amendments introduced by the Conservatives and then the actual motion itself. Let's bring back our front bench who have patiently been waiting. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. Larissa, I'll start with you. What do you think the Conservatives strategically hope to gain by doing this?
Exactly what they're doing. They're forcing the Liberals to pick a side. And you're either on the side, seemingly, of building pipelines, but not only building a pipeline, getting that oil to market, getting that gas to market, getting that natural resource that we have that is our most amazing competitive advantage against the rest of the G7 to market. It's the one thing that when we're talking about, do we want to diversify our trade? It's the one thing we can actually send, but it has to get on a boat off the coast of BC and go somewhere. And just like the U.S. that ships their oil up the coast of BC, we want our oil to go up the coast of BC. And the sticking point here is that the Liberals aren't supportive of getting rid of that oil tanker ban right now, right? And in the MOU, you're right, the Conservatives haven't put in an industrial price on carbon. They don't like prices on carbon because it makes stuff more expensive. But the wording of the MOU and the point of the MOU is to show Canada, to show Alberta, that Mark Carney isn't presenting what the true facts are. He went from being pro-pipeline to maybe not. And this MOU is designed to show everybody, and we're talking about it still today, that it's not a done deal, and we still have to keep the pressure on. And it really is only the Conservative Party that is very much pro-Canadian oil, pro our ethical clean oil supply, and the Liberals are really, really, really split on that.
What's the counter to that from the Liberal perspective, Dan?
Well, I think that's a big stretch, Larissa. I would say that if the Conservatives were trying to do one thing here, it was to get themselves back into the conversation. And I'll give them some credit. They've done that a little bit. They've spent the last few weeks on other topics, on affordability, leading off question period on issues that lots of advisors and commentators would have said that they're stronger on and they should focus on. And it's kind of been like a bunch of trees falling in the woods because the nation's conversation has been about the MOU in Alberta and the development of our resources. And they've kind of been unable to find a path into that conversation. I'll give them some credit. With this motion, they have done that. I'm not sure that they're effectively wedging the government in any of the ways that Larissa's described, or perhaps that they would claim to intend to do here. I think they've just been trying to get some coverage and get the Conservative Party into this story. The reality is, though, by not introducing a motion that was the full nature of the MOU and forcing a vote on the part of the Liberals for the exact text of the MOU, they give the Liberals a bit of wiggle room here to say, well, this isn't the full thing. This isn't the agreement that Danielle Smith endorsed. And if the MOU that's good enough for Danielle Smith in the province of Alberta isn't good enough for the Conservatives, well, we're not going to support this motion and we're not going to give them this win. I think in politics, and particularly in parliamentary procedure, if your opponents are trying to lay a trap, it's best to just try and avoid that trap. And I think that's what the Liberals have effectively done today.
I guess the only part that confused me, and I get why the Conservatives would want to lay that trap, right? As we discussed in that interview, like, there are Liberals on the record who are uncomfortable with what this MOU does. But I don't really understand, Laura, why the trap isn't just the entire MOU. Like, that would really be then truth-telling.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I think it's been abundantly clear that the federal Conservatives don't support the industrial carbon price. I mean, they've been using that as, in their public remarks today, they believe that that is raising costs on food and other items, and the Liberals say it's not, and there's a back and forth. But there's clearly an ideological opposition on the part of the federal Conservatives to that element of the MOU, even though it was signed on to by Alberta, and they don't believe in it and they want that scrapped. And so they have kind of given the Liberals an out by not putting the full text of the MOU to a vote, because they don't want to support that, it seems, that one element of the MOU themselves. I think they probably could have had some Liberals abstaining, not showing up, voting against if they put the full text in order to show that there clearly is some division in the Liberal caucus. But, nothing unites the Liberals like hating on the Conservatives and vice versa. And so, that in a way, it's kind of brought the Liberal caucus closer together now, because they can just point the finger at the Conservatives because, even if they're angry, upset, disagree with the Prime Minister on this particular item, even if you look at someone like Stephen Guilbeault, he clearly feels that while he's disenchanted with what's going on, he feels change can still be achieved from within. And so I think that really is the dividing line.
I'm so sorry, Laura. The vote has just started on the amendment. So my apologies. Probably what you're saying is more exciting than what I'm about to show, but it is the interior of the House of Commons as we await. So the process is that they will vote on these amendments that the Conservatives introduced this morning, which was the addition of a couple of component parts of the MOU beyond just whether or not there is support for pipelines. So Indigenous ownership, for example, consultation with BC, and carbon capture, like large-scale carbon capture. And then my understanding is they'll vote on whatever remains of the motion, basically, whatever's added to the motion, et cetera, all of it. Kathleen, as we watch that unfold, your thoughts on the pre-positioning from both parties?
Yeah, a good thing to level set this conversation is reminding folks that these Opposition Day motions are not binding. And they are really 75% political gotchas or political ambushes and around 25% policy. So, but the Conservatives, what they're trying to do really here is I think they really overplayed their hand because they were trying to sow that division, as you've said, as my panelists have said as well. But they kind of, because they didn't do the whole MOU, they had to backtrack and they had to do an amendment on the floor. That's what's being voted on first right now. And the Liberals kind of outmaneuvered them in some ways. Mr. Carney is not known for being sharp in question period. He's not always the person with the fastest quip. But actually today in question period, he was pretty strong, where he came out and said, listen, there's no limit on the word count in motions. And guess what? The MOU is already translated. How about you just append that to your motion and let's go? And he really did put it back on the Conservatives to say, why aren't we voting on the whole thing? But I want to make one other point. It does really feel like the Conservatives right now, like Dan said, are trying to get back into the news. And that's why they're playing some of these, political ambush games. But it does remind me of the fall of 2024. And why I say that is if you're watching committee, which I know folks at home are not always watching committee like I am, but if you're watching the Justice Committee, if you're watching OGO Committee, they are stagnant in the same kind of filibustering
smells like
games.
an election. Yeah.
It smells like an election again. They're kind of grinding these committees to a halt. And it really does feel like that fall where you're like, wow, maybe things aren't going to move and we're going to really need to go to an election in the spring.
Yeah, like nothing has happened over the last number of weeks, which is super interesting. If you're just joining us now, there's a vote taking place, if we can show that live shot right now, in the House of Commons, I believe still on the amendment, and we can see various members of Parliament standing up there to cast their vote. We'll keep our eyes on that screen. We'll keep that up there for you to watch it unfold. The motion that they are voting on ultimately is one introduced by the Conservative Party. It is, as Kathleen mentions, not binding, as Opposition Day motions are always not binding, but they are often used to highlight an issue that the Opposition Party feels is, inherently political and one that they seek to highlight. In this case, it's all about the Ottawa-Alberta Memorandum of Understanding signed just a few weeks ago. Feels like 3 years ago, but it's just a few weeks ago, on the prospect of developing a new oil pipeline to the West Coast and what that would require in exchange. A whole host of things, everything from negotiations on an increased price on carbon in Alberta to a big carbon capture storage facility, to consultation with both BC and Indigenous groups and Indigenous people who are alongside whatever route would come forward. It's also all predicated, I should say, on the prospect or the potential of a private proponent coming forward to actually pitch that pipeline. Larissa, as the vote is taking place here, what is your view on why the whole thing wasn't put to a vote? Like, strategically, what difference do you think that would or wouldn't have made?
I mean, the Conservatives are pretty steadfast on how they feel about a price on carbon. And you can put up any kind of liberal policy expert or even a lot of economists who are a little left-leaning who would say you're wrong. Conservatives haven't really wavered on that piece, so it's not surprising that they wouldn't include that in their motion. What you just said, though, Vashi, about a private sector proponent, while this motion is non-binding, it is symbolic, right? And this pipeline doesn't get built without a private sector partner and private sector proponent, and honestly, without Indigenous buy-in as well. And what the Conservatives are trying to do is to show that there isn't the political backbone that Mark Carney said there was. He gave a veto to the Premier of BC, and he didn't have to do that. He could have said, I get that people in BC don't want this. I get that they don't want to let Canadian oil tankers go up the coast of BC and dock on the coast of BC. I understand that. But for the good of the country, for our ability to diversify our trade to partners other than the United States, we're going to do this. And we're going to take, the political tough medicine to do it. And the Prime Minister is not willing to do that. And I don't blame the Conservatives for highlighting this.
Dan, what do you think about that?
Well, I'll start by saying I don't think many in the private sector are making decisions about where to deploy capital based on Opposition Day motions in our Parliament versus a landmark agreement between the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta. Look, I get that what the Conservatives are trying to do here from a political and optical standpoint. I mean, I guess this motion gives them the ability to send a bunch of tweets out tonight about how Liberals voted against a pipeline and create some confusion about it. But I don't think the voting public is confused about where the Prime Minister is leading the country and his party on this issue. He has been abundantly clear. He wants to develop our resources. It is an economic imperative for a moment of crisis. I don't think Canadians are confused about that at all.
So they're still voting on the amendment. What do you think, like, how do you think, Laura, this issue is playing with the public right now? Do you think, I mean, Stephen Guilbeault was a very public exit out of cabinet. I would say some MPs have not been shy about voicing their hesitance around some of the climate concessions in particular here. Is the confusion at all, though, about the Prime Minister?
I don't think so. I think it's playing probably very well with the Conservative base. Like, I think that there is a lot of frustration among Conservatives writ large about the past 10 years of the Liberal government. There's some frustration that Prime Minister Carney seems to have switched tact from not just Justin Trudeau, but his previous positions on climate change and the environment. And I think the Conservatives just seem kind of fed up that the Prime Minister appears to be kind of skating by here. And they're trying to drive some daylight between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. And that may have not have been as apparent as it was, particularly under the previous Prime Minister, of course, Justin Trudeau. And so, Pierre Poilievre has a leadership review coming up in January. This is happening in Alberta. There will be a segment of the Alberta population on kind of the right side of the spectrum, even further right than the Conservatives, and maybe even with the separatist movement, who will be very frustrated by this deal between Alberta and the federal government. So I think that's really who it's probably resonating with the most, and that's where these memes will be going wild. Whether this is resonating with the average person, I think the Prime Minister made quite a splash with his announcement the other week with the Premier. I'm not sure that this kind of replaces that, but it probably is going to be effective in terms of reaching Conservative supporters and fundraising and getting those people riled up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, the real contrast, if the Conservatives, are to paint one, will be around execution, right? Like the MOU seems, and public opinion polling shows, pretty popular, like more popular than maybe many of us would have estimated it could be. But that is all like in theory, right? Like that's theoretical. It will still depend on so many things actually happening, Kathleen, before execution becomes like a very significant thing. I can imagine if it doesn't get executed on, the contrast is much easier to paint. But right now, to Laura's point, like the contrast that they're able to paint with the Liberals is just so different than the capacity they had to do that with Trudeau when it was so evident.
Yeah. And the criticisms about execution are a long game play, not a short game play for the Conservatives. And so they're trying to manifest things that they could do in the short term. And this whole Opposition Day motion, the whole idea is you want to kind of put the other party in a bind and essentially wedge them. And in some ways, it's a bit of a jiu-jitsu moment for the Conservatives, where they may be getting a bit jammed on the industrial carbon price and how that may impact the Pathways project, which they're generally supportive of. And they're also getting jammed on something else, and that's the relationship with some of the other Conservative premiers, right? Driving that wedge, which already exists, I would argue, between the Ontario Premier and the federal Conservative Party, and then driving it further in between now the Alberta Premier and the federal party, because we know that Danielle Smith is fully embracing this MOU and wants it to happen and going forward. So I think that that's a problem for them, and I think they're long game play, but that is decades away about criticizing how the government will eventually, if this pipeline moves ahead, tries to execute on it. But right now, they're going to have to think of something more creative than they have in terms of criticizing Carney's approach.
So we're just waiting. That was the vote that took place on the amendment, I believe. Everyone voted along party lines from what I could see. The Bloc, which I don't think is a surprise, that was one of the last ones I saw there, voting against the amendment. So now we'll wait for the rest of the vote to take place on the actual vote, and the front bench is kind enough to stick with us as that happens. Larissa, could you talk a little bit about the premiers versus the Conservatives? Like, clearly, I don't get the sense that the Conservatives feel this is a loser for them at this juncture. I think that they want to be talking about pipelines when they can. They are convinced that a large swath of Canadians don't buy into the idea that the Prime Minister will do what he says he will in this MOU. Do you think that they are convinced that what they are convinced of is based in reality?
I do think it's based in reality, and I think there's a difference to respond to something Kathleen said, that Danielle Smith has fully embraced this MOU. Sure, but that doesn't mean she fully embraces an industrial carbon tax. She's sort of holding her nose and tolerating it. And I think there's a difference there. And I think the Conservatives, the federal Conservatives, don't have to do that. And so they're not going to do that. And they haven't really wavered on their belief that an industrial carbon tax makes things more expensive, and that it's too expensive right now to buy groceries and to ship goods and to, you know, afford the basics in Canada right now. So I don't blame them for doing this. I think you're right that there is a wedge between Conservative premiers and the federal Conservative Party. I don't think that is, you know, exacerbated by today. I think that Conservative premiers across the country unanimously want to see this pipeline get built because it's good for all of Canada. And it's logical that if you're building a pipeline to Tidewater, it's got to go somewhere. It's got to get on a boat and go somewhere. And Carney has given a veto to the Premier of BC, who has said he does not want Canadian oil tankers to be able to dock off the coast of BC and take our oil to new markets.
The North Coast.
Sorry. Right.
The North. The North Coast.
Yeah, sorry. But
they're already docking down south. Yeah.
Absolutely. But you see those oil tankers in the U.S. going up that same coast, and the Conservative point is you can't be, you know, I said this earlier on the radio, you can't be half pregnant on this. If you're supporting pipelines, you're supporting the ability to get that oil to market. If you don't support pipelines, you don't. And the Conservatives are trying to, you know, call out the Liberals on their sort of, you know, playing both sides here. And Kathleen said earlier, if this project gets built, it's not a sure thing. And the Conservatives are trying to really hammer home, these are the risks of this project not getting built. There is massive divide in the Liberal caucus for this project not to get built. And I think, you know, while the Liberals are showing a united front, they're all voting along party lines right now, and they're calling out, you know, their deep support of an industrial carbon tax as the reason why. I think behind closed doors, there is massive disagreement about this policy, massive disagreement about the MOU, and massive disagreement about Carney going all in, seemingly, on Canadian oil.
The amendment has just failed, I am told. The vote just concluded, so the amendment doesn't go ahead. So now they're going to vote on, when that vote does get underway, the actual motion. Dan, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on this line from both Larissa but also Mr. Scheer earlier, that their impression is the caucus is massively divided. I put some version of that to the parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Energy, who contended that wasn't the case, and that he thought that if it was the MOU as a whole, it would be initially he said a unanimous vote and then later said near unanimous. What is your sense of like how divided Liberals are on this, truly?
Well, I think the Liberal caucus a year ago was staring down a historic defeat for the party, possibly the loss of party status under the former Prime Minister. And Mark Carney took them to an enormous success in the election that we had earlier this calendar year. And so almost all the Liberal caucus members owe their political careers to the Prime Minister and have a great deal of confidence in his leadership and in the historic nature of both this deal, but also its political achievement, right? I mean, as you noted earlier, Vasi, the public opinion polling that has emerged since the signing of this MOU between the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta has been broadly shocking in its support coast to coast in parts of this country where that may not have been expected. And so I think for, you know, the Conservatives to pretend as though this is a topic they actually want to be talking about is a bit rich. I think this is the last thing Conservatives want to be talking about right now, because this is probably a deal they wish they could have gotten if they were in government, right? I think Conservatives would much rather be talking about issues that are stronger for them, like affordability, like crime and safety, which I think are political winners for them. But they can't break through on those issues right now because Canadians are focused and our national conversation is focused on this issue. So they're trying going to find a way to play it to their advantage. I'm just not convinced it's going to work.
Okay, if you're just joining us now, there seems to be a little bit of discussion going on in the House of Commons. The amendment that the Conservatives brought forward to their motion has been defeated by a vote of 196 nays to 139 yays. We are standing by now for the rest of the vote on the actual motion to take place. Before it does, I think I have time to squeeze in a quick commercial break. Our front bench is sticking around as that vote takes place. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back to Power Play, a little bit of an extended edition here. I took a commercial break at the exact wrong moment. As I was throwing to that break, the House of Commons was actually MPs were deciding to apply the vote on the amendment to the actual motion itself, which means that the Conservative motion is defeated. Our front bench stuck around for the whole thing. I'm here with Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Laura Stone, and Kathleen Monk. Larissa and Dan were talking as we led into that, so I'll just give a quick final word to both Kathleen and Laura. Kathleen, you first. So the motion goes down. It's over. The great
the
national moment is
gone. But I do want to say there are 3 days left of the House sitting before the House rises for Christmas. So lots of time still, Vashi, for shenanigans to happen, whether in the House, at committee, who knows? Cabinet
new U.S. ambassador.
Exactly. We saw breaking news tonight on a number of fronts. Who knows what's going to happen? So still lots of time, especially in these last final days. Often the House sits longer to get through some things, and that's when all the crazy stuff happens. So don't move off this dial.
Laura, last word to you.
I did find it interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, friends, but I didn't see the Prime Minister in the chamber voting on this. He was not there. So
I don't think so.
It didn't seem...
I don't think so, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see him. So if he was not there, as we didn't see him, I mean, he didn't even want to dignify this with a response. I think that's telling.
He could have voted virtually, maybe?
Yes, he could have.
He did. I'm just being told in my ear he did. My apologies.
Okay, he voted virtually, so there you go. But he wasn't there in person. I don't know what he was up to. But, I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, this was kind of a political gamesmanship in the House. It probably gives the Conservatives some fuel to add to the fire of, their supporters being riled up about this. I think ultimately, though, the Prime Minister and the Liberals are going to face a lot of pressure to live up to the high standards that they have set with this MOU. They've pledged to build a succession of major projects and to diversify Canada's economy quite significantly. So, regardless of this, Mr. Carney will have to deliver, and it can't be decades down the road. And so I don't think this is sort of the last that we're going to hear from the Conservatives on this particular issue, but the Liberals are going to have to live up to the hype very soon on, especially with trade negotiations going the way they are with the United States. The pressure is on, I think, for the Liberals on the economic front.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your patience and your time and your insights this evening. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone, our wonderful front bench, talking about that developing news, the vote in the House of Commons that took place on the Conservative motion around the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Alberta and Ottawa. The breaking news is that it was defeated. I will also tell you the other breaking news tonight was that Kirsten Hillman is stepping away from her role as Canada's ambassador to the U.S. early on in the new year. We'll continue to have reaction throughout the evening to that big news tonight on CTV News Channel. On that note, though, I will leave Power Play there. I'm Vashi Kapelas. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your